Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we have a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, my predictions for the third round after what happened in round 2, some more injury updates, only a couple of injuries to get to today, and some more off-season rumors, this time involving two Pacific Division teams in the NHL Oilers and the Seattle Kraken. I'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. And before we get into all those things, I'd like to kick things off with a video with a channel update. I forgot to mention this on Tuesday, but we have now hit 50 subscribers on the channel. So that is big news. I'd like to thank everyone for their support. I love doing these videos. I would not be able to do them without all of your guys' support. So thank you for getting this channel up to 50 subscribers. Let's try and get to 100 now. I'd love to get to 100 subscribers, hopefully in the next month or two. So, thanks for getting to 50 subscribers. Once again, remember, if you like these videos, continue to subscribe. I love doing these videos and just love all the support that I've been getting. So, thanks for all of that, and I can't wait to continue to do more videos, and hopefully we'll get 100 subscribers next in the not too distant future. But now onto the video. We'll start with some of the signings that have happened recently. There have been a couple that have happened over the past couple of weeks. I'll start with a couple of entry-level contract signings today. First with the Arizona Coyotes. They have signed 2022 6th-round pick Maximilian Szuzbar to a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $868,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, Szuzbar was a 6th-round draft pick of this past year, so it's really great to see him already as an entry-level contract. As a left-shot defenseman, looks really good. He's been playing over in the German league in the DEL. Had a goal and 7 points in 35 games last year, 3 goals, 10 points, 46 games this year. So he's done really good for a defenseman over in the German league. He's a really good defender. I think in time he should definitely be a good third pair defenseman. Probably still going to need another year in the DEL and then maybe a year or two of minors. But in time, I think Szuzbar could definitely be a really good third pair defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes. And I think that was a really good steal late in the 2022 draft. So good to see him get signed. Looks like a really good defender, and I think he should be a really good fit long term with Arizona. Next was the Tampa Bay Lightning. They signed one of their young prospects in Maxim Groshev. Groshev signed a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $868,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, Groshev was a good young forward. He's been playing over in the KHL. He can play on the wing, either wing, so he's a really good versatile forward. Groshev only gone to 3 KHL games last year, putting up an assist, but he did a lot more productive this year, putting up 4 goals and 6 points in 34 games. So, really good point total for him over in the KHL. He should come into the minors next year and do really well. I expect him to probably spend a year or two in minors, but after that I could definitely see him being like a good middle 6 forward for Lightning. We know Lightning, our team is pressed up against the cap, and could definitely use some of their prospects who are on cheaper contracts. So yeah, I think in a time, maybe a year or two, Groshev should definitely be a really good third, maybe second line forward for the Lightning. He looks like he could be a really good force in the forward group, so that's a really good sign for a Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't expect Groshev, who was a 2020 third-round pick, to get his chance eventually, but for now I expect him to probably continue his development over minors, and then in time, him to be a really good middle 6 forward for the Bolts. Next, with the Winnipeg Jets, they signed one of their top prospects in 2021 second-round pick Nikita Chibrikov, who signed a 3-year, $876,000 deal that will begin at the start of next season. Now, for Chibrikov, another guy who's been playing over in the KHL over the past couple of years, been doing really good. Chibrikov is probably one of the Jets' top prospects. Him, along with guys like Lucius and Lambert, are probably their top 3 forward prospects, so good to see him get under contract. Chibrikov looks like he should be eventually a really good middle 6 forward. He's a right winger, so definitely looks like he can definitely be a really good right wing middle 6 forward. Didn't have any points in 4 games played last year in the KHL. Had a goal and 2 points in 31 games this year, so he looks really good. I expect him to probably do the same sort of thing like Groshev, maybe a year or two of minors, and then he should definitely challenge for an NHL spots. But definitely, I think the signing for the Jets is really good. Chibrikov is a top-end prospect, and in time, he should definitely be a really good middle 6 forward. So another good signing for the Jets. And then over with the Washington Capitals, they signed a top-end player who's been playing over in the KHL. They signed 2022 first-round pick Ivan Miroshnichenko to a 3-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $950,000. Now, for Miroshnichenko, he dealt with a lot of off-ice stuff, battling through a disease last year, which definitely derailed his playing time last year. Due to the Russia factors and his contract being so long in Russia, he dropped a little bit. He was projected to be a good top 10 pick, but due to the stuff he was battling, due to his KHL contract, he dropped to 20th, where the Washington Capitals picked him up. After having 10 goals and 16 points in 31 VHL games last year, which is the KHL's junior league, sort of, this year he did quite well. 3 goals and 4 points in 23 KHL games, so he looked really good. He terminated his contract over in the KHL and signed a 3-year entry-level contract with the Caps. So Miroshnichenko still looks like a really good player. I expect him to be a really good top 6 playmaker in a couple of years' time. Probably still getting a year of development, in my opinion, so I wouldn't be surprised if he started the season off in the AHL next year. But I think in time, Miroshnichenko should definitely be a really good player. Maybe even playing on the top line with Alex Ovechkin towards the end of his career. So, in my opinion, that's a really good signing for the Capitals. Really good to see him come over from the KHL and possibly play at the AHL level next year. I think Miroshnichenko looks really good. And the guy's a left winger, so I think this is a really good fit for the Capitals. He should definitely be a good middle 6 forward in time, and I think Miroshnichenko is going to be a real powerhouse for the Capitals. So good to see all 4 of these entry-level contracts get signed. Groshev was a top prospect in Tampa, Chibarkov a top prospect in Winnipeg, and Miroshnichenko a top prospect in Washington. So good to see all 3 of these guys get the 3 entry-level contracts, and whether it's in the minors next year or maybe even get a shot at the NHL, all 3 of these guys should have NHL futures. And Suzbar with Arizona Coyotes is not a top-end prospect, but seems like he could have a good future in the NHL. And I think in time he could definitely be a good third-pair NHL defenseman. So, good signing for all 4 of these teams. Just a couple more contract extensions. First with the Capitals, keeping with them. They have signed Alexander Alexiev to a 2-year, $825,000 contract extension to keep him in the fold with Washington. Alexiev's a really good third-pair defenseman for the Caps, who showed it this year, getting some NHL opportunity with guys like John Carlson, Dmitry Orlov, and Teravainen out at some points in the season. So Alexiev looked really good. Last year, he didn't have very much NHL experience, only played in his first NHL game. He was mostly an AHL player, putting up a goal and 19 points in 68 games. This year, only put up an assist in 4 AHL games, was mostly playing in the NHL, sometimes a healthy scratch as a 7th defenseman, sometimes in the NHL, but when he got into the NHL, he put up 5 assists in 32 games, so he looks really good. I'll expect Alexiev to probably continue to remain with the NHL club next year, maybe as like a 7th defenseman or in the 3rd pair, but I think Alexiev is definitely looking like a really good NHL defenseman, and I think that's why the Capitals are probably going to keep him on the roster for next year. But definitely a good signing for the Capitals. And then over with the Minnesota Wild, they signed pending UFA forward Marcus Johansson to a 2-year, $2 million deal to keep Johansson in the fold after the Wild acquired him in the trade deadline, and he helped the Wild play in the first round against the Dallas Stars. Now for Johansson, he's a left winger, right winger. He can play in the middle 6, maybe even the bottom 6. He looks like a really good versatile forward, so getting him, keeping him in Minnesota is great. He did fantastic with Minnesota this year. Last year, he split time in the NHL between the Kraken and the Capitals organization. He had a decent point total, putting up 9 goals and 29 points in 69 games. But this year, splitting time with the Capitals and the Wild, he's done fantastic. He's put up 19 goals and 46 points in 80 games. So Johansson had a really, really good season this year. Almost hit 50 points. Was a real force, especially once the Wild acquired him. And I think he fit in really well with the Wild. So whether it's on the 2nd line, the 3rd line, or the 4th line, Johansson's going to be a really good versatile forward, playing in either the middle 6 or the bottom 6 for the Minnesota Wild for the foreseeable future. But definitely, good signing for the Wild to keep around a good versatile forward who can help in a variety of areas of the lineup. And good for the Capitals to continue to have that good young defenseman in Alexiev for the next couple of years. So that's all the signings I'm going to get to today. Next, we go over to the playoff update part of the video. Now, there's no playoff updates. Since we last talked on Tuesday, there have been no games. The NHL's conference finals will kick off tonight between the Panthers and the Canes. And then we'll start going back and forth. Canes and Panthers on one day, Knights and Stars on the other. Canes and Panthers, Knights and Stars, and I'll go back and forth until one of the series finishes up. So, definitely going to be interesting to see, but the conference finals do kick off today, so there's no real playoff updates, but I will give you my playoff predictions for what I view will happen in the 3rd round. Now, before the playoffs started, I made my full predictions for what I was expecting. Before the playoffs started for the 2nd round, my predictions were Dallas would sweep Seattle, Vegas would be Edmonton in 7, the Rangers would be the Islanders in 6, and the Leafs will beat the Bruins in 7. Now, after my first round predictions, I got 5 of the 8 correct, all 4 in the West. So Dallas still played Seattle, and Vegas still played Edmonton, but I only got Toronto right in the East. So Boston lost to Florida, the Islanders lost to Carolina, and the Rangers lost to the Devils. So I had to rework my predictions. So for the second round predictions, I predicted the Devils would win in 6 over the Hurricanes, the Maple Leafs would win in 6 over the Panthers, I switched the Stars to winning in 6 over the Kraken, and then I said the Knights would beat the Oilers in 7 still, so I kept that pick. Now that the second round's done, we can review those picks. Knights did win the series, so I was correct there, but they did in 6 games, not 7, so I did not get the series length correct. Dallas did beat the Seattle Kraken, so I was right on that account, but they won in 7, not 6, so I was wrong in the game selection there as well. And then instead of the Leafs and the Devils winning in 6, it was the Hurricanes and the Panthers winning in 5. So it got neither of the series length nor the team right. So predictions for the second round, I went 0 for 4 in picking the series length, and I went 2 for 4 in picking the teams who went to the conference final. So not too bad. I would have liked to get at least one of those series length picked correctly, but it is what it is. So my predictions before the playoffs start for the conference finals was Vegas-Dallas and the Rangers and Maple Leafs. And the conference finals are now Vegas-Dallas and the Canes and Devils. So a little bit different on the eastern side, but surprisingly, all my predictions for the western side have so far been right. Dallas, Seattle, Vegas, Edmonton moved on from the first round, and Dallas and Vegas moved on from the second round. So surprisingly, I've been 100% right about the Western Conference. So for my predictions for the third round, I'm going to keep my prediction for what I said earlier, and that is that Dallas goes to the Cup final. I think Dallas wins in 7. Dallas and Vegas are really good teams. They can match up really well against each other. They both have defenses that can shut the other team down if they get a lead. They both have really good offenses. You have stars like Stone and Marchessault and Eichel on the Knights. You have stars like Pavelski and Hintz and Sagan on the Stars. But they have pretty good offenses. Also have pretty deep teams on the offensive side as well. But the one big difference I see with these two teams, the Knights have guys like Hill, Brossoit, Logan Thompson, who are really good goalies. No one is at the same level of goaltending as Jake Onger in Dallas. And I think Onger could definitely be the difference maker in this series. I mean, we saw it last series. He did have a couple pretty bad games against the Kraken, but when it mattered most in Game 7, he shut the door on Seattle. So if it comes down to that, I think Onger could definitely shut the door on the Vegas Golden Knights. So in my opinion, that's who's going to go to the Cup final. Dallas for the West. For the East, I'm going to say it's the Panthers in 6. Both the Panthers and Canes, really good teams. I'm done trying to say that the Canes are not going to have any offensive help now that they don't have guys like Teravainen, who's a guy who could also be back in the early part of the series, and Pacioretty, Svechnikov. I'm done saying that they're not going to have very much offense and they won't be able to match up against a more offensive team. They've shown over the past couple of series they can get offenses from a variety of different places. So I'm done saying that they're not going to have as much offense as the opposing team. I think they will, but just given the fact that the Panthers play a really physical style game, they showed that against the Bruins, they showed that against the Maple Leafs. They have a guy like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett who are really good players. Their defense, I think, would be a little bit worse than the Carolina Hurricanes. The Hurricanes, I think, have a really more deep defense. But I think Bobrovsky is right now playing like the better goalie, way better than a guy like Ranta or Anderson. So, in my opinion, this is going to be another good long series. Probably going to go close to the distance. Like I said, I expect 6. But I think the way Bobrovsky's playing right now, their physical style of game, and the fact of how good they're playing after being two top teams at the Leafs and the Bruins, I expect the Panthers to go to the Cup final. And so in a battle between the Panthers and the Stars in the Cup final, I'm going to say Stars in 6. I originally picked the Rangers to beat the Stars in my original Cup final predictions. I'm going to change it here to Panthers lose to Stars in Cup final. It's Stars win their first Stanley Cup since 1999. So that'll be a really good Stanley Cup final. What I do think will happen. If I had to do what I want to happen, I would hope for a Vegas Golden Knights Florida Panthers Stanley Cup final, just given the fact that I like when the teams who don't have very much success or have not won cups wind up winning them. And of the 4 teams, Florida and Vegas have both never won a cup. So if those two were to go into the Stanley Cup final, it would guarantee that one of those 2 teams who have never won a Stanley Cup wound up bringing it home this year, which I would love to see. So if I had to have an ideal Stanley Cup final, that would be it, to see if one of these teams are able to bring home the Stanley Cup for the first time in franchise history. But in my opinion, I do think it will be a Dallas Stars Florida Panthers final with a Stars winning the cup. So definitely interested to see if I get these predictions right. We were able to get half of the teams right. Second round, none of the series lengths. So hopefully I get at least some of the series lengths correct. And hopefully I get a little bit more better predictions than I did in the last round. So let's hope that we get some more predictions. Let me know down in the comments who you think will be the Stanley Cup final this year. Will it be Carolina, Florida, Vegas, or Dallas? And who do you think will be facing off in the Stanley Cup final? And who do you think will win the Stanley Cup final? Definitely let me know down in the comments. But that's all the playoff update I'm going to get to today. Just a quick update on the injury front. Not too many. There's a lot of talk right now that Teravainen could be back for Game 1 in the Eastern Conference Final against the Florida Panthers later today. That will be a huge boost to the Carolina group. Teravainen's been out since the early part of the first round, so he's missed the second half of that first round series against the Islanders, plus the entire second round series against the Devils, so he's definitely been out for a while. So if they were to get him back, that would be a huge boost to that team in the Carolinas. So hopefully he does get able to get back. One other small injury update. After leaving Game 4 of the first round due to an injury, missing Games 5, 6, and 7 in the first round, and all 5 games in the second round, Panthers bomb 6 forward Ryan Lomberg has been cleared to play, and he could also get back in game action for tonight. So it would not surprise me at all. Lomberg's a really good fast forward who can work on the penalty kill, so if they were able to get him back in the lineup, I don't think it will be too surprising. So good to see that Lomberg's cleared to play and could play in tonight's game. Also good to see that Teavu Teravainen could also be in the mix for tonight's game, and I expect the Carolina Hurricanes and Florida Panthers to start the conference finals off with a bang in tonight's game. And that's all the injury updates I'm going to get to today. Next, we'll go over to the off-season rumor part of the video. Now, we have the Edmonton Oilers and Seattle Kraken as the two most recent teams who have been eliminated and have started their off-season. So, what sort of things could we expect from these two teams? Well, we'll start with the Seattle Kraken, as they were the lower team in the standings of the two. So, the Kraken had a fantastic season. Now, no one expected them to make the playoffs, me included. I expected them to do some better things this year, maybe not finish last in their division, get a little bit higher in the standings, which I think is what most people will expect. It's just a little bit of growth, but they did a lot better. They were able to get first wild card in the NHL. They finished with 100 points after finishing with, I think it was 60 last year, so a huge jump to make their first ever playoff appearance. And then not only did they get into the playoffs, they upset the defending Stanley Cup champions in 7 and took the Dallas Stars to Game 7 in the second round series before losing to them. So Seattle had a fantastic season this year. I don't think anyone is surprised that they were ousted by the Stars in 7, and I think they have a bright future ahead of them. So I don't expect much changes in the offseason from the Kraken. If you look at net, Grubauer was definitely not the starting goaltender in the regular season, but after that playoffs where he really saved the Kraken's butt a couple of times, I definitely think he's the starting goaltender next year. I just don't see any other way that Grubauer is going to be traded or anything. Grubauer's their starting goaltender. That's why they signed him. That's why they brought him in. Grubauer's staying as the starting goaltender. So I think the bigger question is, who's his backup? Martin Jones was the backup for this year. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. You also have Joey Decord, who's a Group 6 UFA, who was brought in from the expansion draft and is a good third-string goalie. If they can re-sign him, do they view him as the backup goaltender? They also have Chris Drieger, who was on injury reserve for most of the season, and then once he got back, was sent to the AHL to be a good third-stringer for the team, and he finished the season as the Kraken third-stringer. But he still has a year left at a $3.5 million cap hit, so do they view him as the backup? I think that's a question that they're definitely going to have to ask. Is Drieger their backup? Should they bring back the court and have him be their backup? Is Jones their backup? Or should they try and let Jones and Decord go, or have Decord as their third stringer, maybe move on from Drieger, who will have a year left on his contract, and try and bring in another goalie who can be their backup for next year? It's going to be interesting to see, but I think Grubauer is their starter, and definitely they're going to have to figure out who Drieger, Decord, someone else is going to be their backup next year. On the defensive end, they definitely have a little bit of business to take care of. Their top defender in Vince Dunn is currently going to be an RFA. So getting him signed to a new contract extension is going to be priority number 1 this year. Dunn's a really good defender who had a career season this year. So getting him locked up is going to be really important for the Seattle Kraken. They also have another guy in Will Borgen, who's also an RFA, who they need to try and re-sign this offseason. So definitely a couple of RFAs that they need to re-sign. But besides that, there's not really too much. They have guys in Alexiak, Larson, and Schultz, who are all still really good defenders for that team. One guy I do wonder about, and I do wonder if it impacts what they decide to do, would be Carson Soucy. Soucy is a pending UFA. He's worked really well over the past couple of seasons in Seattle, but he's a really good defender. There's not too many UFA defenders this year, so he could come at a very high price. And if the Kraken don't feel that he can be re-signed for a reasonable enough price, he might walk into free agency. So if they are able to re-sign him, I don't expect too much movement. Maybe bring in like a third pair, seventh defenseman to help that team. They already have a couple of good guys like a Megna and a Fleury, but I could see him maybe bring in another guy. If Soucy moves and leaves via free agency, I do wonder if they maybe try and bring in someone else via free agency or via trade. They do have the cap space and the draft capital to do it, so I do wonder if they try and consider that. They could try and acquire via trade or via free agency, but I do wonder if they try and bring in another defenseman if Soucy is not back. I do also wonder if good young defender Riker Evans gets a shot next year at the NHL level, as he's done really well in the AHL over the past couple of years, so definitely a couple of question marks, but getting Dunn signed is going to be priority number one. Soucy, if they can bring him back, great. It's definitely going to be huge to bring him back. If they can't, I do wonder if they maybe go out and try and acquire another defenseman, either via trade or free agency. And then Riker Evans is shot on the defensive end. And if they can do all of that, they should still have a really good decor. Now in the forward group, I expect very little change, maybe next to none. They have a solid top nine still. They have guys like Tanev, Tolvanen, McCann, Burakovsky, Schwartz, Eberle, Bjorkstrand on the wing. That's 7 wingers playing 6 spots, so that's really not bad at all. They put one on the 4th line. They still have a guy like Daniel Sprong, who is an RFA, who they do need to re-sign, but once they re-sign him, he's going to be another good 4th liner. They have a guy like Morgan Geekie. They have a couple of young players in the minors who could challenge for roster spots next year, like a Ty Karche, who did really good in the playoffs. The one move I do wonder is you got Gord and Beniers as your top 2 centers. They'll probably want to bring in Shane Wright next year to be a consistent NHL forward. So if they bring Wright in as the 3rd line center, I do wonder if they consider trading Alex Wennberg. Wennberg was a really good player this year and really did help them. But if they have Wright as their 3rd line center, they can maybe move Wennberg for a couple of draft picks or a couple of good young players. Wennberg's a really good 2nd line center, so if the Kraken move him, there would definitely be some interested parties. But Wennberg would be a guy who I would definitely say could be on the trade block, especially if they want to bring in Shane Wright on a full-time basis. But really, besides that, I don't really see much else. Like I said, Sprong needs to be re-signed, Geekie needs to be re-signed. There's not really much else on that team. So besides that, I definitely don't expect them to bring in too much. Maybe they bring in 1 or 2 bomb 6 forwards who can play a more physical style game, but really, besides that, the Kraken have a really deep offense. No one really going to free agency this year, and I expect them to just continue to keep their team intact as much as they can. So, in my opinion, they have a good starting goalie in Grubauer. They need to find who is the backup, whether it be Drieger, DeCord, or someone else via free agency or trade. On the defensive end, they need to sign Dunn. Then they need to either bring back Carson Soucy, who's done really well, and have him continue to play on that defensive end. If he moves on and goes to free agency, then bring in someone via free agency or trade, or maybe get a young guy like Riker Evans a shot at the NHL level, and I think they should definitely be good at defense. On the forward group, re-sign Sprong, re-sign Geekie, maybe bring in a couple of bomb 6 forwards who can play a little more physical style game, and then maybe consider moving Alex Wennberg so Shane Wright can have a 3rd line center role next year. And if they do all of that, I would expect to see Seattle Kraken to once again be a dominant team in the Pacific Division, and probably make the playoffs and maybe even challenge for a top 3 spot in the Pacific next year. So definitely, Seattle's looking really good. After the Edmonton Oilers, they finished 2nd in the Pacific Division this year, slightly behind the Vegas Golden Knights. They did really good. They were able to get past the LA Kings in 6 games in round 1, and it looked really good for them. But after that, they were not able to really find much momentum against Vegas. They lost the 1st game, they lost the 3rd game, they lost the 5th and 6th game. So they never were able to get a lead in that series, and Vegas was able to shut down their great offensive attack. So their problem was definitely 5-on-5 play. Their power play is their key to success, and when they don't have too many power plays in the game, the Golden Knights were able to shut down their 5-on-5 offense. So that was really their downfall. So what can the team do to improve this team for next year? Now, Skinner showed that he can be their starter. I expect Skinner to be the starter next year in Edmonton. One thing I do wonder about is, do they try and move on from Jack Campbell? Campbell did not play overly well in the regular season. He did have a little bit of a better playoffs, but they were mostly as coming in for Stuart Skinner. I do wonder if they try and move on from him. He'll have 4 years left at $5 million. It just hasn't worked out with the Edmonton Oilers. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were no teams and stuff that he was back as like Skinner's backup. But I would also not be too surprised if the Oilers explored trying to move him and tried to find a new home for Campbell. So that would not surprise me at all. And if they do move on from Campbell, I expect them to either try and bring in via trade or free agency a cheaper backup who can back up Skinner, maybe sort of a veteran type player. But definitely, I think that's probably the move on the goaltending side. On the defensive end, I don't expect too much to be changed. They have a couple of good young players like Broberg, Niemelainen, Darnay, who are going to be really good defenders over the next couple of years. They have Nurse, they have Ekholm, they have Kulak, they have CC. The one guy who they do need to extend is Evan Bouchard. Bouchard's going to be a restricted free agent. He was a really good offensive player this year, so they're going to need to clear some cap space to try and re-sign Bouchard. They only have $5.9 million right now, so another benefit from moving Jack Campbell. But definitely, I think this team needs Bouchard, so extending Bouchard is going to be important. After that, I don't really expect much. Maybe they sign one more veteran third-pair defenseman to work with those younger guys like Broberg and Niemelainen. But besides that, I don't really expect much changes on the defensive end. On the forward group, they still have a solid top six. Yamamoto, Hyman, Draisaitl, RNH, McDavid, and Kane. So I wouldn't expect too much on the forward group to be changed. They still have a couple of good young bottom six forwards like Costin, McLeod, and Holloway. So I think those three should definitely be NHL forwards next year. It would not surprise me at all if younger guys like Bourgault, Savoy, or Lavoie were able to make the NHL roster next year. I definitely think any one of those three could possibly make the NHL roster, but I'll expect them to probably bring in one or two bottom six forwards, maybe keep a couple of guys around like a Bukestad or a Janmark. But I'll expect them to try and retool that bottom six a little bit, continue to help them have some depth scoring, and then probably move on from Warren Foegele. There was a lot of talk about him being moved around the trade deadline. He has 1 year left at $2.75 million. It would also help them try and re-sign some bottom six forwards and get an Evan Bouchard extension in place. So I would expect Foegele to be one of the guys we watch out for as a possible trade chip. But besides that, I don't really expect Edmonton to do much. So in my opinion, for the Oilers, in net, you keep Skinner as your starter, and you either have Campbell as your backup, or you try and trade Campbell, move on from him, and bring in a cheaper, more veteran backup for Skinner next year. On the defensive end, don't make too many changes. Maybe bring in like a third pair defenseman who can help in the third pair, and then sign Bouchard to his new contract that he's going to need. Probably going to be something around $5, $6, $7 million per year, so definitely going to need to clear some cap space for that. On the forward group, you have a solid top six. You have a couple of good young forwards in the bottom six right now. You can have a couple of guys like Bourgault or Lavoie get to NHL action next year as bottom six forwards. I would expect them to probably try and bring in some new bottom six forwards, maybe re-sign a couple guys like Bukestad or Janmark. And on top of all of those, try and move Warren Foegele to clear some more cap space. And I think if the team can do all of this, they should definitely be another contender next year. They should definitely contend for the top spot in the Pacific Division. And they should continue to try and bring a Stanley Cup to Edmonton and give McDavid and Draisaitl their Stanley Cup next year. So that's how I think Edmonton will do. And I think if they can play this out well, they should definitely be a playoff and Stanley Cup contender. So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Do stay tuned. Either later today or at some point tomorrow, I will have another video on the channel discussing how the Arizona Coyotes situation has unfolded and what's next for that team. So definitely stay tuned for that video. But remember, thanks everyone for the support, for getting the 50 subscribers. Just remember to keep on subscribing. Also check out my blog. I have a blog that I also do discussing some of these rumors and news as well as like off-season previews and stuff. So definitely check that out down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.